Good evening. Welcome to another stream. I am Emily Domino Taylor. This is my personal stream. However, I do work at SOE, and recently I've been helping write quests for the new EverQuest II expansion. So tonight I have permission to walk you through creating a small trade skill quest and just go into a little detail of what all is involved. If you have played EQ2 or really any MMO, you might be wondering how much effort it takes and what all goes into making a quest. So hopefully I can give you some simple answers. So here we are in EverQuest II. Right now I am standing in Halas. This is the beta server. And I've just made a beta character. So, we don't actually usually start in game other than wandering around trying to get ideas. We usually sit down in front of Excel or just a sheet of paper and just try and write some point form notes. We do have some proprietary software which we use to actually create the quests and the files related to it, but it doesn't really matter exactly what's used. Every game company will probably use something slightly different. EverQuest II does it in one way. A lot of other games use different database formats, but I would imagine some elements of this quest would be similar to most MMOs, and some are probably unique to EQ2. So I'm going to switch over to Chrome, and I'm actually going to use a presentation, a Google Docs presentation, just to do the outline. So generally what I do when I'm thinking of a quest is first I figure out why am I making the quest. And I might be making a quest for a number of different reasons. Maybe there's an expansion coming up and I know we just need a bunch of new quests. Typically for a new expansion, these would be helping to tell a bit of the story about the new zones, maybe lead players to points of interest within those zones, help them feel as if they're a part of the story of whatever's going on in those new zones. If they're quests going into older areas, then there might be a specific purpose to them. Maybe they are specifically to highlight a feature that we're introducing that happens to be in older zones. Mercenaries, for example, or transmuting when that was introduced. Or maybe we've just decided that we'd like to give some lower level rewards to whoever the player group happens to be, and we want to, just give them out in an interesting way instead of just having them magically appear in your books or just stick them on a merchant. It's a lot more fun to go out and quest for them. So there could also be a live event going on. Maybe it's Halloween, Nights of the Dead in EverQuest II. Maybe we want some seasonal flavor. So what type of quest it is going to answer some questions about what level the quest should be, what kind of style the quest should be. If it's a Halloween quest, it's probably a little more fun than if it's a serious expansion explaining the lore type quest. If it's a lower level quest, then maybe it needs to be aimed at players who are not familiar with the world or not familiar with all of the more advanced systems, for example. So in this particular example, one of our designers, Keith, wanted to give trade skillers a number of expendable items which would be useful both for them to use and for them to sell at all levels. And he wanted to give one out every 10 levels. The idea being these would be consumable so people could keep making more and always have something to sell, always have a market for them. So he came up with a list of these 10 items. Actually, I think it was 11 because we've just added a new set of levels. The idea being that there'd be one in the zeros, one in the 10s levels, one in the 20s levels, 30s, etc., up to level 100, which you would make at those trade skill levels. And so he then asked me if I would have time, as I'm helping out on EverQuest II at the moment, whether I would have time to make a quest or a quest line to give them out. He could have just stuck them on a book that you buy in the merchant, but like I said, it's a lot more fun, and it gives a lot more flavor to add a quest. And fortunately, I was able to make the time to do a little quest line for him. So with that in mind, I knew it was going to be 11 quests. I knew it was going to be a series that you would get one after the other, spaced 10 trade skill levels apart. And I wanted it to have a sort of a consistent storyline. I wanted it to feature probably one or two similar characters so you'd kind of get to know them. Obviously, someone who's a max level trade skiller now would get the quests and be able to complete all 10 or 11 of them right away, but a new player coming to the game would experience them throughout his entire or her entire crafting career. They would be spaced out every 10 levels as he leveled up. And so he or she would come to know the character, and hopefully it should be a likable character that they would like to hear from every 10 levels, and it should be something that they enjoy. As a side bonus, I wanted to use the quest lines to show these new players a little bit of some of the other zones that maybe current top level players aren't visiting that much anymore. And there are a lot of trade skill quests throughout the world that I wanted to draw a little attention to. So I would coincidentally maybe place some of these quests next to one of the trade skill quest givers at the appropriate level. So while you're gonna go and do this, level 30 quest, oh, coincidentally it's in the same zone and right by the same quest giver as the guy who already is there giving out a level 30 different trade skill quest. So kind of multi-purposing here, and but also trying to make an interesting story that makes sense and kind of ties in with the items that Keith wanted to give out. So we started with a list of the items, which were completely unconnected. They were just random expendables that would be useful. And then I tried to think of some kind of storyline that could possibly tie all of these completely random different things together. And that took a little while. What I'm going to do today is just go through the first quest and show you how it was made, just in a rough outline form, and give you an idea of everything that goes into it. So the very first item, the level 5 really item, is a expendable that can be used to res priests. Now priests already have a spell they can cast when they're in a group that gives an item to every group member, which the group members can use to res that priest if the priest dies. However, that requires that the priest remembers to cast that before he dies, and it also requires that everyone in the group knows what it is. And for each priest class, it's actually different items, so it can be a little confusing. Am I with a Fury? Oh, it's going to be a Feather of the Phoenix. So if I'm with a priest, it's going to be I can't even remember what it's called for a cleric, but it's not necessarily always the easiest thing to find. So we figured for the very first item, it might be kind of handy to just have this, which you could just carry stack around of at all times, and then you always know that if you're in a group and you've got a priest who's in trouble, you don't have to count on him to have remembered to give you that item. So the item that he gave me was called, hang on a second, I can actually look up the name. It was called Blessing of the Prime, that's it. And it is actually a little inventory item that sits in your bags and you click it, and when you have a priest targeted, it will res the priest. So I thought, well, we can start in our first quest by maybe finding a priest who's in distress, and you have to figure out a way to make this item and use it on the priest. And then I thought, well, what would be an interesting character? What would be a character who might travel between a lot of zones? What would be a character who might want a lot of random items? Well, maybe it's someone who's really greedy and he wants you to keep making him stuff and he keeps asking for more and more. That was my initial thought, but then I thought, but you wouldn't really like that guy. That's kind of a jerk. He's kind of taking advantage of you, and you don't come out of that quest line feeling like a hero or feeling like you did something good. You come out of that quest line feeling like you got taken advantage of. And it's really important also, when a player is going through a quest line, how do they feel about themselves as well as the characters afterwards? Now, sometimes we might want to make an intentionally annoying character, and I am certainly guilty of that. If you've played EverQuest II, then I apologize for Quo Olgren. He really is an annoying little brat, but that was definitely intentional. But that's definitely the exception to the rule. In general, you want people to come out of your quests feeling happy about themselves and happy about the quest. So then I thought, as I was trying to write the outline, well, what if it's a child, and maybe he needs your help. Maybe he is traveling around because he wants to be a pirate when he grows up, and he wants you to help him find things that would help his piracy. And I looked at the list of items, and several of them I could kind of tie into piracy, so that kind of became the theme for the quest. So I figured we will start with a kid, and he wants to become a pirate, and you need to help him throughout the quest line. Then I started thinking about the details. Okay, well, why do you need to help him? Why doesn't he have parents? Why isn't he in a city where he already has all this stuff? Well, maybe he's lost his parents. How did he lose them? Maybe he got shipwrecked. This gives us a good excuse for the player to be really heroic, find the shipwreck, rescue the kid. It also explains why he doesn't have anyone to help him. It could explain any number of random items that might have been washed up with him, which could be useful quest objects. So, our first quest has a title, Shipwreck, that's the name of the quest. Now the next thing I do is I tend to just brainstorm what's going to happen in the quest. Alright, well, how would you find out about a shipwreck? I don't want, because it's going to be sent to a very new player, a player who might not have been in the game very long, who's probably not really up to leaving the city where he started in yet. He probably someone who's not going to be, wandering around remote shoreline zones where there could be a shipwreck. Probably want it to be delivered to them. So maybe it's an item that gets sent to them or given to them by someone that they would meet in their home city. Now, in a game where you all start in the same home city, this could easily be accomplished just by having an item or a character in that one home city. But in EverQuest II, there are 4 starting cities plus Kinos and Freeport, which aren't actually cities to start in, but you can certainly visit them very early on and live there. And having to make 4 to 6 different characters who would all coincidentally run into a new player and offer him a quest seemed a little clunky. So we do have a system of in-game mail delivery through which we can schedule mail to be sent to players when they meet certain criteria. For example, when you reach trade skill level 5, send you a mail which appears to come from an in-game character. So I figured you get in-game mail from someone who has found a message in the bottle that maybe was sent from the ship as it was sinking. Who would find a message in the bottle and maybe deliver it to you? Maybe from the harbor master. Alright, so that's step 1. Then what happens? Well, maybe there is, so how do we get you to the island? You've received the bottle says, help, our ship is sinking, if you get this message, please send help, but how do you know where to go? Well, maybe whoever sent the bottle enchanted it. Maybe there's a spell on the bottle that will take you to wherever the boat ended up. Let's hope it's not underwater, but this is a fantasy world, so it all works out. So now we have an actual message in a bottle that you rub it, touch it, interact with it somehow. It will teleport you to the island. So teleport player to, and why did I choose an island? Because an island can be a separate zone, which means I can allow only one player into the zone at a time, or rather they all get their own individual instance. That means I don't have to worry about a lot of complications of if 5 players arrive and they're all trying to rescue the same, shipwreck survivors. That can feel a little weird. For a quest like this, it's not something that is really a group experience, it's more of a personal story, so it makes more sense if you are there alone on this island and you're the only one there who's trying to help this guy. So I created the next step, which was teleport player to an island where the shipwreck is. And next step, then you search for survivors, obviously. Then you try and find something to help the lone survivor that you found, who is going to be our main quest giver. Then you make something to help. In this case, we are going to make the Blessing of the Prime spell, which reses healers. which means that our survivor is going to be a lone healer who is unconscious or drowned or something. And what do we find that will help? We're actually going to find a recipe book containing the recipe to make the healer res item. Fortunately, it was washed up in the shipwreck too. So then you have to find ingredients, and actually that would come here. So first you find the recipe, then you find the ingredients to make the recipe, then you make the recipe, then you return to use Blessing of the Prime on healer, and finally, oops, finally talk to healer, finish quest. And your reward is you get to keep the recipe for the Blessing of the Prime. So it ties it nicely into the item that we want to give them. This is the purpose for the quest. But it also makes consistent sense from a story point of view. So now we've got our basic outline. I would generally open up our internal tool and I would create a quest file. And a quest file in EverQuest II anyway is basically just a list like this, slightly more structured format, but containing stage by stage and part by part all of the steps that will actually update a quest. So every time your quest goes ding and you get a quest update, it's typically one of these points. And you have to figure out what is going to trigger each of the update points. So what do we need now? We've got the very high level. Now we need to figure out what exactly do we need to accomplish this. All right, so to set up in-game mail, first I have to write a mail letter. So I've got to actually sit down and write the letter, and I've got to create a message in a bottle item, which the Harbor Master will attach in the mail. And I've got to, in this case, I decided to make it a house item, which you could actually place in your house, click on it to teleport you. So then I needed a appearance, because I can't just have a bottle with no appearance, so I needed to find a bottle that pre-existed that I could just reuse, or I would need to talk to the art department to actually make one. In this case, we were able to use pre-existing items. So those are all the things that I needed at a very high level again for this. I also had to hook up the mail letter for delivery at level 5, so it would check when a player dings level 5 trade skills. It would look through all of these scheduled player events and say, aha, well, they're supposed to receive a letter in the mail from the Harbor Master at this point. Let's send that. And then, sure enough, after a delay, which I can specify, a message will appear in their mailbox. So, as you saw, I am on EverQuest II on the beta server. And let's find the mailbox, and we can actually see how this worked out. So, I got this message. Office of the Harbor Master is the sender. Subject missing property, and in the text, I kept it fairly short. This bottle was found in the harbor immediately after you were last here. Is it yours? Please take care not to litter our city's clean water. Signed, Office of the Harbor Master. And I figured I'd have a little fun by making it sound a little formal. He's not being a total jerk, but he is a little worried about maybe it was you who's throwing bottles into the water, which maybe explains why he's sending you a mail and why he thinks the bottle is yours and has actually taken the care to send it to you, because if he didn't have a reason, I mean, why would he send you a bottle? He'd just throw it out. So this kind of explains why you're getting it in the first place. And this letter offers you this quest. Shipwrecked. There's a little description of the quest. I received a mysterious message in a bottle which was apparently found washed up from the ocean nearby. I'd better take this home and investigate what it says. So I will accept the quest, close my mail, and I now have my quest helper over here saying, shipwrecked. And stage 1 of the quest is place the bottle in your home and read the message. So let's run upstairs here to my home. Don't actually have a home yet, so I'm going to buy one and enter it. And the message in a bottle was actually automatically placed into my bag when I accepted the quest. Oops. All right, so this is my nice little Halas one room. Oops. And in my bags, there's a message in a bottle. I'm going to place it over here. Even scale it up a little so you guys can see it big. So, see, it's just an ordinary bottle. But I actually placed a scroll inside it, so it actually looks like a message in a bottle. Now, if I click on it, I can read the message. Now, back to our dialogue here. I actually need to add one more thing here. Write the message in the bottle and connect the teleport to that. So you can see there's quite a few steps just for part 1 of this quest. That's a lot of different files that I've had to make. That's 1 file, 2 files, 3 files. This actually took the 4th file. That was a 5th file, and that got added to a 6th file. So yeah, getting up there. We've got 7 files already if we count the quest. All right, so reading the message in a bottle. Whoever finds this. As I write this, our ship is sinking. We're somewhere off the coast of the Enchanted Lands, but I don't think we'll make it. This bottle is imbued with a tracking spell that will take you to the boat's remains. If this bottle reaches you, please bring help. May Prexus spare us all. And Prexus is one of the aquatic associated gods of Narath. So I've got 2 options at the bottom. Activate the spell, or put the bottle carefully away, which will do nothing. So I am going to click to activate the spell. And if I zoom out, you'll see the little teleport effect plays on me. Alright, so here I am, and I'm on an abandoned island. If you play EQ2, it's possible you recognize this, although I would really like it if you don't. This is actually a player purchasable house. This is a halfling-themed enchanted island, and what I've done is place a little bit of decoration around so it's not immediately recognizable, but the actual home has a little halfling-style house here. The door is hidden behind this rock. Ooh, you can just see a little bit of the wood there. I was a little careless there. But I've added, you know, abandoned old shack. I've added a bunch of wreckage from the shipwreck. And done a little decoration like this is an overgrown old farm. So this is a brand new zone. So back to our quest planning. Teleport the player to an island where the shipwreck is. So, what files do I need for this? Well, obviously I need an island. As mentioned, we didn't exactly have a perfect island for what I wanted, so I created a new one based on the geometry of existing house. And then I had to place appropriate objects for decoration and to disguise the fact that it's a house. And then I also had to do a lot of things associated with the zone. So any zone, well, I need to define the area where you're going to arrive, what happens if I use my evacuate ability or my escape ability, depending on the class. And what happens if I somehow manage to die? It's obviously a fairly safe zone, but theoretically I could drown myself, perhaps, or goodness knows. I did end up putting one attackable thing on the island for a later quest, so theoretically I could die, so I need a respawn point. And normally I would need an exit point as well. So all of these things needed to be done just to make our island. I'm actually going to move that over there. Alright, in addition to that, I needed to find all of those objects for the decorating, and create different files for each. So I had to find this shipwreck. This is actually, I think, from Common Lands. There's shipwrecks in a few of our zones as well. Thundering Steps has some as well. Planks. This is a shattered crate. A barrel. There's a broken barrel somewhere. There's the broken barrel. And I had to position them all so that they look natural. I had to find this old shack. I'm not actually sure what zone this is from. It might be from Common Lands. And all the items around it. So, you know, that's probably at least a dozen more items. Plus the positioning. But hopefully it looks fairly successfully like a bit of a shipwreck. And over here, we see the first stage of our quest, which is look for survivors. So, all of that work, and we're still only here, which is actually the first stage, or the second stage, I guess, of our quest. This was the quest offer, this was stage 1, this was stage 2. So, what do we need to make this bit work? Well, we obviously need a character. We need someone for you to find. And a character needs clothes, he needs a uniform to wear. And that's a separate file in EQ2. It wouldn't necessarily be in all games. More relational database-based games, it might just be pointing to particular links, but one way or the other you gotta dress the guy. And you also have to figure out things like what will he say and what is he doing. In this case he's unconscious, so he's not gonna say much, but he does need a state or task. And he needs some limited dialogue that will progress the quest. So, in this case, he's actually not wearing a ton, he's wearing kind of rags, which makes sense, he's a shipwreck survivor. Now you can see I decided to make him a Rotanga character. And I am very fond of Rotongas. I do play one as my live character, and I think they're adorable. But I thought it was kind of funny to have a rat from a sinking ship, obviously. And I wanted a character that was neutral, so it could exist in both good and evil cities normally. I didn't want to choose a race that a role-playing character of the opposite alignment might immediately take a dislike to. For example, if I'd made the shipwreck survivor a high elf, maybe a troll character would just not want to help him, and vice versa. So Rotongas are able to exist in both good and evil cities. They're fairly neutral in alignment. It fits very well with the pirate theme because they do tend to be sort of rascally scamps. And also they're very cute and endearing, and hopefully you want to rescue this poor little drowned guy. And he is supposed to be a fairly young Rotanga, so I've actually scaled him down so he looks like a child. He's not a full-size Rotanga. And his name, I actually got Twitter's help. I had been brainstorming ideas for the name, threw out a few ideas, and Graphic was the one that Twitter seemed to generally like the best, so Twitter helped to name this guy. So let's talk to him if we can. And all he says is, ugh. And I say, hello, you hear me? Do you need a healer? He says, I am a healer, nobody else left. And so my reply is then, let me look around and see if I can find anything to help. Because I'm writing the quest and I'm writing the dialogue, I can conveniently lead the player, hopefully not too obviously, in the direction that I want them to naturally go. Obviously, I want them to go and start searching the wreckage at this point, so I will make it seem like it's their idea and try and make it sound like it's a fairly obvious thing. Now my quest is updated, and I'm searching the wreckage for anything useful. Just like a chat, Matt is asking, does this correlate to what we might expect with Storybricks and a landmark EQ Next? Well, first of all, those are two separate games. Second, absolutely not. That is a completely different system, which will be not like this at all. This is specifically EverQuest II and probably similar to standard old school quests, but I would not assume anything about this is going to be similar to EQ Next or Landmark. So, looking around the wreckage, and oh, there's a book. In fact, there's a couple of books, but we'll just let you take the first one. Take the book. I found a recipe book. Now, let's go back because I'm getting a little bit ahead of our outline here. So here we go. Find something to help. Well, we've obviously found a recipe book. So I need to make a recipe book. And I need to make the recipes, or a recipe in this case, in it. And those are 2 files. I also need to make we call them designer placed objects, as opposed to an object that the zone artist has built into the zone. So a designer placed object, to click to get the book, because actually those are 2 different things. The appearance of the book that's lying on the ground is not what you're actually going to get in your inventory. The book on the ground is going to give you an inventory item which you will scribe to get the recipe. So it's actually 3 items. Alrighty, so we're in here. Then you have to find the ingredients, obviously. This is going to require having the harvest nodes, which, similar to the book, the harvest node is actually the item in the game that you click on, and the harvest is what you get in your inventory that you can craft. So, I have placed these already. I used mainly common harvests that you'd be expected to mine at this level anyway, to gather at this level. So these are like level 2 harvests that you would find in the movie zones. So I've made a rock, click on it, and do my little mining animation. Oh, didn't find anything there. I think this being a beta character, I have like 0 harvesting skill. So this might take a couple of tries. Wow. Oh, actually, I should actually go to the node which has what I want. What I actually want is to gather these things: Jum, white tea leaf, black coffee bean. These are the things the recipe asks for, and those are actually from the gardens. Playing through this quest right now, I realized I should probably add text in the quest helper here that specifically says from the abandoned gardens, because a new player might not necessarily know this. And no, it doesn't say it if you open up the details. So let me make a note for myself to correct that tomorrow. But for now, yes. We will harvest these long abandoned gardens. Got a black coffee bean. Yeah, my harvesting skill must be like 0. But that's right, because these only require about 5. Chat is all scrolled up. And you can see as I find these things, the quest is being updated. Got the Jum, now I just need a white tea leaf. And all of the things like me kneeling down as I click on the thing, these are all little details that we actually specify when we create these items, I could have me do a dance whenever I click on the garden if I wanted it, but obviously I use a standard gathering animation. But these are all custom details that need to be thought about by a designer and adjusted or added, and if they get left out, it can look a little weird if you just stand there rigidly while magically things appear in your inventory. So I found all the harvest stuff, and now it's asking me to find something to use as fuel. Well, that looks like withered kindling. That doesn't seem to be updating my quest, so maybe I want the barrel of coal. And yeah, that updated my quest. So, what is our next step? Well, we haven't written it yet, so let's go. Now I need to actually craft the item. So this will come from the recipe. Recipes specify all sorts of details about what you're going to make, including what level you need to be to use it, what items are required to make it, what you're going to get out of the recipe, what the fuel is going to be, how much fuel, how many of the harvests you need, what skill you use to make it. There's actually a huge amount of detail in a recipe, so I won't go into all of the details there, and that's something that probably would be quite different from game to game. But we have made the recipe already, so we don't need to add anything there. What we do need to actually have is an actual blessing of the prime to be created when the recipe is completed. So that is actually an inventory item and a spell that goes on it. So the physical item that is the icon you see in your bags, and then spell that actually happens when you click on it. So let's use this makeshift workbench here. Oops. First let's scribe the recipe book I picked up, which gives me this. And now I am going to create this. The recipe also specifies what reaction arcs appear along the bottom here, and how long it takes to get to the end of the crafting process. Because this is a newbie quest, I actually made this require a good deal less progress than most normal recipes are, so it finishes pretty quick. So I have made my Blessing of the Prime, my quest updated. Next step, use it on the Rotanga. Back we go. And, there he is. So, I don't actually need to make a new item for this, but it does require some script on both the spell and the character. And again, this may be handled differently depending on the game, but essentially, in some way, you're going to need to tell the game that the click that you're going to do on the item that you've just crafted needs to make the character do something. So, in this case, I crafted an item. Here it is. I'm going to drag it to my toolbar here. Oops. Clear that away so we can see it. So there it is on my toolbar. I target the healer, and when I click this, it activates the spell on the item, which then causes the character to stand up. And there he is. I have revived my little Rotanga healer. And now he's got his quest update book. So let's go back over here, talk to the healer, finish the quest. So what does this need? It doesn't need a ton more. It just needs some dialogue notes. So, dialogue. And quest rewards for when we finish the quest. So, that was a little tricky, the way he stood up. What actually happens is there's really two different characters here. There's an unconscious version of the guy who's always lying on the ground. When you click the item on him, it plays the state that he's floating up in the air like you saw, and it looks as if you're reviving him. And the second that that finishes, the quest updates, and the standing up character becomes visible. The lying down character becomes invisible, so it appears that the guy lying on the ground rose up and is now standing, but in actual fact, It's a matter of what you can see at any given time. And we can set view predicates, they're called, on items or characters, so that you only see them at certain times. And in this case, you only see the standing up guy as soon as you update that step where you use the item on him. And that's the point at which you stop seeing the lying down guy. This isn't always necessary, but it's much easier to do it this way when you are changing states like this. Especially when you have an unconscious character. Typically, an unconscious character, you don't want to move around to face you. Typically, a character who's standing up, you do want to move around to face you. So it's easier to just make one lying down character that cannot move, and then a standing up character who actually can turn and face you. For example, he's going to turn around when I heal him. The guy who's lying down didn't move at all when I healed him. That would look weird. He'd be sliding around the ground. A lot of these are just cosmetic things, but they are things that we always need to take into account when we're making these quests. So let's hail Rafik. Thank yous, I feel much better. And I say, my name is Emily, or you would fill in whatever your character's name was, and you're welcome. What happened here? So this dialogue is fairly unique in what I've seen in other MMOs. EverQuest II does this in a way that looks like dialogue nodes, almost in a comic book, where the character has a speech bubble and then you have a speech bubble you can choose for your response. Not every MMO does that. Some of them just give you one big wall of text and you don't really get the interaction with the character. I like the way EverQuest II does it because it allows you to customize conversations much better. It allows you to offer the player choices in what they say. In this particular quest, I didn't do that, but if I wanted to get complicated in a dialogue interaction, I could give a whole bunch of different options down this side, and the player chooses which they feel is most appropriate, and depending which they choose, it can give them a lot of different information or a lot of different interactions. In some of the later quests, I actually use that to explain some of the systems of the game. For example, mercenaries or transmuting. For players who are already a high level, they already know about transmuting. Rafik will say, do you know about transmuting? And they can say, yes, I know all about that. And then it will just take them straight to the next step of the quest. And they'll say, oh great, well I need this adornment made. However, if you're a brand new player, no idea what transmuting is, you say, no, I don't know what transmuting is, what is that? And he will give you a couple more dialogue notes just explaining, well, transmuting is how you can break down items of equipment to make materials that you can use to create adornments, which are used to enhance your equipment, blah, 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 and he can point you in the direction of the trainer. So it allows, for example, customizations like that. Or potentially I could base this on alignment. If I were a good aligned character, maybe I would see one reply, but if I were an evil aligned character, I could show you a totally different reply. Or I could just give you the choice and let you choose. So there's a lot of flexibility with that you don't get when in games where you just have one wall of text that is the same for everyone. That said, it takes a lot more work. Each one of these speech bubbles is a separate file, and they all get chained together in almost a flowchart style. So this speech bubble with this reply, if I click on this, it actually says, when I click, what will I go to? And it links to the next speech bubble. So I click, and now this is a new file. Now it opens this speech bubble file saying, Rafik says my name. My family was traveling to Freeport, so I could study to be a Fury when I grew up. But the ship hit something. My parents stuffed me in a barrel. They're gone, aren't they? And then I reply, I don't know, Rafik, but I didn't see them on the island. Maybe they made it elsewhere? And you'll notice I actually lay him down beside a broken barrel just to go with that little flavor in his text. Probably most people won't notice that, but the people who do tend to appreciate that kind of detail, and it adds a little more realism to the quest. So when I click on this, it's going to open the next file. I think I need some time alone to think and look through what's left. Thank yous. And I say, I'm sorry, good luck. And I get my quest reward, which is a permanent version of the Blessing of the Prime recipe. And I get a little text summary of the quest, just as a reminder that I can look up and read in my quest journal, 5 years from now if I've forgotten what the quest was. Spell it on a message in a bottle took me to an abandoned isle and the remains of a shipwreck. The only survivor I could find was a young Ratonga boy named Rafik, who was on his way to Freeport with his parents to train as a Fury. I revived him and left him to finish recovering. And I'll accept that. Now I have my quest reward recipe. If I look in my recipe book, you'll notice my other recipe that I crafted earlier has been removed. I secretly removed it while you were talking to Rafik, because that was just for a quest version of the item that actually res the character. That would not work on a player. This was specifically scripted to work in this quest on Rafik. So I have removed that recipe. You now get the new version of the quest, which you will scribe and which will appear in your book. And then you can make the normal version, which will really work on any healer. So, now how do we get off the island? Well, conveniently, I have left my boat here with a big sign saying, take the boat back to the mainland. And if I click on it, this will take me to the Enchanted Lands, which, as you may recall, the original message said that they were being shipwrecked off the Enchanted Lands. Now, on a slightly amusing myself note, you have just taken the only boat that Rafik had, and he's now stranded on that island, which you probably are not going to realize until the next quest in 10 levels, when you go back and find him very hungry, having had nothing to eat but cabbages, and complaining that you took his only boat. And the next quest will be a quest on how to get off of the island, which coincidentally is another one of the items, the expendable items that Keith listed, which is a teleport that will take you to any home city. So, back to our files. So what did we create? We created a quest file, which contained all of these steps. And then as we made each of these items, we hooked them up to the quest file so it knew what to update each of them on. For example, for this step, find something to help, it would update when the recipe book pops into your inventory. On this step, it would update when the harvest nodes get added to your inventory. On this step, it would update when you crafted the Blessing of the Prime, etc. So each one of these quest stages actually has a file linked to it. It has one of the files on the right side linked to the stage in the quest that is going to say, yes, this is how you know it's completed. Time to move on. And in this last step, it's Rafik's dialogue notes that update it. So we have the quest file, we have the letter from the harbor master, we have the message in a bottle house item, we have the message that pops up when you click on the bottle, we have the teleport spell, we have the appearance of the bottle, we have the we've edited the player events file to actually send the mail appropriately. We have the island zone, and creating a new zone, even one that uses existing geometry, uses a number of other files. So you've got to specify the what spawns in the zone, what objects are in the zone, what junctions connect to the zone, like what other zones you can get there from or to, what the landmarks are in the zone, things like the respawn points, what am I forgetting? Trigger volumes, which are items, or not items, locations marked out that you can enter. For example, when you enter a region and get a discovery, that's because you have entered a trigger volume. So that's probably another 5 or so files right there. So we're up to 14 now. Then there are all of the objects for the decor that probably added, I don't know, let's say another 10. Well, let's round it up to 25 items. Because each different item type was a new file. Let's see, that's 25. Then the character, actually there was 2 versions of him, as I explained, passed out and healed. So there's 2 there, plus his outfit. We had him saying 1 dialogue, 2 dialogues while he's unconscious, so that's another 4 files, so that's 29. Then we had all the harvest nodes. In this case, there was only 1 for this quest, plus the fuel, so I guess that's 2. And I used existing harvests, so I didn't need to create new ones, although I did need to create a quest fuel. So we'll just call that another 3 files, so we are now up to 32 files. Oh, and I forgot the recipe book and the recipe in it, and actually there's a 3rd file involved in the recipe that just specifies how many recipes are in the recipe book, so that's 3 more, plus the book you click on, 4 more, that's 36. Then there was the clicky item you make and the spell on it, that's actually 3 files. The script, technically speaking, wasn't new files because it was on the existing spell and the character file, so I won't count those. Then dialogue, he probably had about 4 dialogue nodes pop up, I guess. So that's another 4. Let's see. I think that brings that to 43-ish. And then there's the final recipe book, which is another 3 files for the final recipe. So I'm counting about 46 files in total for that one fairly short recipe quest. And this is using our quest tool, which makes things a lot easier for us. All we have to do is we make each individual file, and when we hook them up to the quest, then it pretty much automatically works. So we don't actually have to code all of this ourselves. We're not programmers. We use the tools that the coders have made to connect those all together and do it fairly automatically, but it is still a lot of logic. Other things that have to be done is actually on the quest itself. It's more than just these little point forms. I have to write the little introductory description you saw. You know, hey, I found a message in a bottle. I'm gonna see where it goes. When you get the do you want to accept this quest window, you need to write the conclusion summary for when you finish the quest, which you'll be able to read in your journal after you do it. And you need to make every stage of the quest detail look pretty, and usually give some additional directions. So you have your little quest helper on the side, which was over here. But if you actually open your quest journal, the quest stage that you're on gives you actually a little more detail in here, as well as just the little short form you see at the side. So if they're lost here, if it's saying like, I need to find fuel, and they've got no idea what that means, ideally they should be able to open the quest journal and say, you might like to look for some coal, or fuel is typically found in a sheltered building, or a little clue like that that would help depending on the level of the quest and how obvious you want to make it. In addition to that, let's see, what else would we need to do? Yeah, that's probably pretty much covers it. On the dialogue nodes, you would typically want to add a little animation so that as you're talking to the character, he's not just standing there rigidly, he's going like this, or he's nodding now and then. That's more flavor than anything. And obviously it also takes some time to get to decorate the zone. If you've made a new zone or even a new area just around a character you've placed in an existing zone, you typically want it to look associated with the quest. So just like I had strewn the shipwreck around, you might have objects related to the quest around the character, and you don't want those showing up in the zone all the time if other players will be going through. So you would need to put view predicates on those, making sure they're only visible when you are on the quest and that they disappear when you finish the quest. So in another 10 levels, I will get the next quest in the series, and it will say something like, hey, I need your help again. And you will have to click on the message in the bottle, and you will go back and help Rafik again. And you will continue helping him for the next 10 quests after that, until you reach level 100 and he gives you the last cool item. And there's a little Easter egg at the end too. So I think I've pretty much covered everything I can think of. I don't know, was that interesting? We kind of gave a talk like this many years ago at a fanfare. We talked about redoing the quest in the Thundering Steps that would unlock the gates at night. We redid that quest in the panel at fanfare. And I actually looked for the original slides that we put together for that, but I couldn't find them, and they appear to be long gone. So I decided to just talk you through one of the quests that I did. But hopefully that gives you an idea. I mean, this is a not a hugely complex quest. Something like a signature quest is way, way more complicated, and it can take weeks to do a really detailed signature quest, including writing all of the dialogue and creating all of the files needed. And you end up with a whole pile of files, and it often doesn't come together until right at the very end when you finally got everything made and you can hook it up and suddenly it works. It's kind of like magic. But as you can see from that, you could easily spend a day or two just writing one quest like this. Experienced quest designers can whip out more than a few in a day, and especially if they're simple quests like talk to guy, kill 10 rusts, talk to guy again. Those are pretty quick. But the more interesting flavor you add to the quest, that generally means the more different files you need to make, the more work you need to put into decorating, making things look pretty, and so the more time it takes. All right, so any questions in chat about that? Hopefully that was interesting. Like I said, this is EverQuest II very specifically. It does not apply to any other game, especially not EverQuest Next and Landmark. I would suspect that other MMOs around the same age as EQ2 probably have similar systems, although not identical. I have not worked on a wide variety of them to the extent that, I haven't seen the tools that many of those games use, so I can't say for certain, but certainly that's the impression I get just from going through and doing their quests. Osmotar is saying, for some reason I assumed quests were made by multiple people. A lore person would write the quest dialogue, someone from art would handle making the island and placing props, etc. So that can depend. I mean, it depends a bit on the game, and it depends a bit on the stage of the game, and it depends a bit on the type of quest. So if, in my experience, which is admittedly limited, some teams do prefer to be much more segmented. They have very specific people who are the writers, and they will write out the quests, and then they have designers who specialize in implementing. They may have completely other people who do things like create the characters and their outfits and things like that, and that can really help a lot in terms of consistency, especially if you're launching a brand new game. You want your quest text to be consistent feeling. You want it to be a consistently high quality. You don't want the guy who's maybe better at making uniforms to be writing quest text if he's not so good at writing quest text. And even if he is fine at writing quest text, you may still want a consistent feel. You want all of your elves to sound like the same style of speech, for example. So that might well be something that you would either have specific writers do, or you might have a lead designer or a lead writer who's in charge of reviewing everything that everybody writes just to make sure that it all falls within the style guides. Some teams are more multifunctional, I guess. The people on them are more diverse in their skill set, and they are able to do everything. In older games, I think you would find that to be more common. In a game that's as old as EQ2, for one thing, most of the designers on it have been working on it for quite a while, so they are very familiar already with the tone of the game, with how a Rotanga should sound compared to a High Off. They don't really need a lot of guidance in terms of, what is appropriate for each race or what the lore is for this. They're experts on this game, and they know all that. So while the lead designers probably keep an eye on them, and we do play tests where we can call out, hey, that sounds a little weird, or I didn't quite understand what that was, and that always helps. It's not really as necessary as it would be in a brand new game where people aren't as familiar with it, because it's new, no one's familiar with it. And over the age of the game, even in EQ2, I'm sure that has relaxed a lot. I wasn't on there at launch, but I am sure it was a lot more controlled back around launch than it is now. In my case, as trade skill designer for many years, I did pretty much every step of the quests. Typically, some things like itemization are handled by just one or two people, because for itemization in a new expansion, you're creating a whole bunch of new items, and you need to be absolutely sure that they fit together and make sense in terms of where the progression is. You don't want one guy making super nice items to go in a solo zone while the other guy is making pretty nice items, but they're going in a raid zone. You want to make sure that the items are in a consistent scale, of improving quality depending on how you want to distribute that, and that really needs to be closely controlled. So yes, in EQ2, for things like item creation, we do still have specialists. They will work very closely with the people making the content, whether that's quests or dungeons or raids or whatever, find out what's needed, discuss it with them, but ultimately, just one or two people will make those quests and then distribute them as they're supposed to be. And yeah, there are some people who don't tend to write quests. For example, there are some people who tend to focus more on making dungeons or raids. And I don't make dungeons or raids, and while I could probably make a very basic one, it wouldn't be great. So yeah, there's still specialization, but I happen to be one of those people who does have experience making quests, And so that is one reason why they're very happy to have me back to help with this current expansion and the tradeskill quests in it. Mojo Kitty's just saying she only just started watching the stream and missed a lot of it, but seems to have enjoyed it. And I will, well, I am recording this, so I will put the highlight of it up on my Twitch channel, so look under highlights probably later tonight or tomorrow, and you can watch the whole thing if you like. And of course, this particular quest line is going live with the Altar of Malice expansion, and it will be live for everybody, I believe, on the 11th, so that's about a week away. So definitely check it out. This isn't specifically tied to the expansion, but it's going to be appearing in-game at the same time. But you can do this whether or not you have the expansion.